Welcome back to another episode, folks. Today we're diving into one of the most talked about claims from former President Donald Trump, his self-proclaimed tough-on-crime stance. If you've been following his rhetoric, you've probably heard him say it a million times. I'm the toughest president on crime. But is that really the case? Spoiler alert, it's not.
Yeah, tough on crime sounds like a great campaign slogan. But when you dig into the actions, it's like calling a paper tiger a real one. Trump's actions, especially with ICE and his pardons, tell a different story. Instead of going after violent criminals, he went after everyday workers. I'm sorry, was this a crackdown on human traffickers or just your local car wash?
Exactly. Let's start with ICE. Under Trump, the focus was not on violent criminals, but on people working in car washes, restaurants, and farms. I mean, the real criminals here are the corporations exploiting these workers, but sure, let's just deport people trying to make a living.
And let's talk about deportations without due process. That was a big one. Trump's ICE agents were grabbing people without hearings, without any kind of judicial oversight. Just a pure get 'em out mentality, regardless of whether they had a right to stay.
Right, and it's not like this was a crackdown on hardened criminals. A lot of these people had been in the US for years, some even decades, and their only crime was working. Meanwhile, the actual criminals, well, let's just say they were getting a free pass.
And don't even get me started on the whole crime crisis he hyped up. This is the part where Trump starts sending the National Guard into Democrat-led cities, claiming they're in the middle of a crime wave, even though crime rates had actually dropped by 40 Cs. It's almost like the only wave he was riding was a wave of misinformation.
It's pretty wild. And here's where it gets extra interesting, his pardons. Trump handed out pardons like candy, but not to the innocent or the wrongfully convicted. No, he pardoned some of the biggest criminals, fraudsters, and of course his political allies.
Let's talk examples, because there are some real doozies in there. Take Dahoud Hanid Ortiz. This guy was a triple murderer. He killed a man by axing his head, slashed a woman's throat, and beat another to death, all before setting a fire to cover his tracks. But sure, let's pardon him, right?
Of course, Ortiz was actually locked up for a while for those crimes, but guess who helped him out? Trump. Ortiz not only got his return to the US, but also a presidential pardon. I'm sorry, but this is not tough on crime. It's the opposite.
Seriously though, the guy was a literal murderer. But hey, Trump has a pattern here. He gave clemency to Ahmaud Zubairi, who was involved in illegal campaign contributions, foreign agent violations, and obstructing justice. Perfect example of someone who clearly wasn't reformed and definitely wasn't tough on crime.
Yup, and then there's Marion I. Morgan. She ran a $28 million Ponzi scheme. That's a lot of money, but hey, what's a little grand theft when you've got a buddy in the White House, right?
That's the thing. Trump's pardons often went to people with deep ties to his world. Take Lawrence S. Duran. Guy ran a $200 million Medicare fraud operation. He's not exactly a poster child for reform, but hey, a pardon's a pardon.
You also had people like Michelle Fiore, who stole $70K from a police memorial fund, and Paul Walczak, who misused $4.4 million in payroll taxes. But don't worry, both got their get-out-of-jail-free cards.
These weren't just random criminals either. There's Michael Grimm, a GOP congressman who was convicted of felony tax fraud. Then we've got Scott Howard Jenkins, who was part of a bribery scandal where he sold deputy badges, a sheriff selling badges. Sounds like something out of a bad crime drama.
Let's not forget about John Rowland, the former governor of Connecticut, who was caught in a corruption and campaign finance scandal. But, of course, he got a pardon. You know, it's not about justice, it's about loyalty.
That's the kicker. It's about loyalty and self-interest. If you were on Team Trump and you scratched his back, he'd scratch yours, even if you were an actual criminal.
Speaking of loyalty, Trump didn't stop at just those examples. He pardoned people like Ross Ulbricht, the Silk Road mastermind, and people like Stuart Rhodes, the leader of the Oath Keepers. Oh, and let's not forget Enrique Tarrio, the leader of the Proud Boys. None of these folks were exactly angels.
I mean, the list goes on. Larry Hoover, a gang leader, Trump gave him a shot at redemption. You've got to wonder how much of this was really about fixing the system and how much was about keeping his political allies in his corner.
Right, and let's remember, all of this was happening while Trump kept pushing the narrative that he was fighting crime. If you were listening to him, you'd think he was out there cleaning up the streets. But the reality? He was letting fraudsters, killers, and corrupt politicians slide right on by.
And all the while, he painted these big, bold pictures of dangerous crime waves that were, frankly, fictional. He used that to justify sending in the National Guard, which, let's be honest, was more about flexing power than actually solving any problems.
Which brings us back to the central issue here. Trump's tough on crime image doesn't line up with his actions. He was tough on some things, like grabbing headlines, but not tough on the criminals who needed it most. He chose to target immigrant workers instead of real crime, and gave passes to those who were aligned with him politically.
It's an important reminder that what's said on the campaign trail doesn't always match what happens in the Oval Office. Trump's actions didn't reflect a true commitment to justice. They reflected a strategy to maintain power and favor with the people who supported him.
So, to sum it up, Trump's tough on crime was really about being tough on people who didn't fit his political agenda. It was more about optics than actual law and order. If you want to look at tough crime fighters, you probably won't find them in Trump's circle of pardoned criminals.
And maybe, just maybe, it's time to stop confusing sound bites with reality. If you really want to get tough on crime, you've got to look at the whole picture, not just the one you're trying to paint. Thanks for tuning in, folks. We'll catch you next time.
Until then, stay informed, stay critical, and as always, don't buy into the narrative without checking the facts.